Good morning and welcome you all to Blissful Literati. Today we are going to discuss another chapter from the first flight, class 10 prose for CBSE board. The chapter is Madam Rides the Bus, and basically we are going to see how, in the garb of this simple chapter, which is childish to say, and yet such a strong message is delivered in this particular chapter. So let's just first think about it. Right? What is the main idea behind this chapter, and what is it trying to show us? You see, basically the chapter is dependent on three main ideas. First of all, it tells us about Valli's sacrifice. I mean, Valli, the little girl, the main protagonist in the story. This chapter tells us about her sacrifice, right? The way she saved up money for the journey to fulfill her desire, and her meticulous planning for the bus journey all alone. And then it tells us about her maiden, the actual bus journey. She had collected the money and then she went on this ride, and this story tells us about this actual bus journey, her excitement and her minute observation of everything around, and also the way she reacts with her co-passengers, the way she comes out of her boundaries and she becomes friendly, a kind of development, a kind of growth, you can say. So this chapter also delves into that emotional, mental, personal growth as well. And finally, this growth ultimately leads to her experience with the life and death through the cow's incidents. Well, it's too many things to take in at once. The way she's saving up money, her journey, and suddenly I'm throwing in a cow's death. So yeah, it is a bit too much, but don't worry, we will go into the story step by step, little by little, baby steps, and we will see how all these things come into the play, and they all lead to this awakening of this young girl, this little girl, the self awakening, or you may say the understanding of the knowledge that we all come with. Right? This knowledge is always there, but to understand, that is the main thing, right? So let's start, and we will start with the biography of this particular person. First of all, this person, Vallikannan, this is not the real name. His real name was Rajavallipuram S. Krishnasamy, and he was born on 12th November 1920 in Rajavallipuram near Tirunelveli, and he died at the ripe old age of 85 on 9th November 2006. He was a journalist, writer, scholar, and his notable works include, well, the books are really hard to pronounce, but I will try nevertheless. Bharatidasanin Uvumai Nayam, Pudukavadayin Thuramum Valachiriyum, Saraswati Kalam, Bharati Kuppin Tamil Urai Nadai, etc. As you can understand that these are all Tamil books, and these are all the Tamil titles without translation, and yeah, they are really difficult to pronounce. However, all these difficult names and I don't know, the topics which he delved in these books led him to win the Sahitya Academy Award for Tamil Language in 1978. Now, let us move on to the themes of this particular story. So, what themes? This story, Vallikannan, in this story, deals with the mysteries of life and death. He also talks about the beautiful life, while death is really horrifying. He shows us the gap between knowledge and understanding, and finally, as Valli realizes, and along with her, we realize that life never comes to a standstill, it goes on endlessly. Now, before we actually jump right into the story, let us have a pictographic depiction of this story, the bus journey, as you say. You see, this image is, we are quite familiar with this image whenever we think about any rural side or even in movies. This image, this kind of image, has made it really popular. It is very popular. We see many characters riding on top of the bus. It is a journey that always they embark upon. Think about the movie Bulbulaya. Even there, Akshay Kumar and his protege, if we may call the boy that, they were also riding on top of a bus. This kind of riding, right, at all times they have always signified a journey, a journey of discovery. Sometimes it is self discovery, sometimes it is the discovery of a mystery, but nevertheless journeys are always associated with discovery. So basically they tell us about the gap between knowing and understanding. And even if we look at the image, we find this very funny, humorous, very exciting. All these people, they're excited, they're raising their hands up. But think about it. Is it really so easy to sit on the top of the bus like that without any? I mean, a person can easily fall down if the bus suddenly halts, applies brake, or maybe they won't. Who knows? But this is what I'm trying to say: a gap between understanding and knowing. We know that, okay, fine, this is the image and this is really very popular and exciting and all that, but do we really understand how it feels to be right there on top of the bus? Well, those of us who have experienced it, they know, but really, not all of us. So, moving on to the story. And even before that, let us first think, why should we read? Right? We have understood right now that this story talks about the theme of life and death, the beauty of life, and the horrid death experience, and also the continuity of life. It doesn't stop for anybody. But honestly, why should we bother? You see, a lonely girl gets her first bus ride, sees the outside world, and comes back home wiser. One has to wonder, what is there so important in this story? Um, Well, have you ever had a feeling of sudden awareness or understanding in the midst of daily habits, or what you may call an epiphanic moment? The fact is, we talk and talk and talk and go on blabbering without understanding the real significance of anything. And then comes a moment when we step out of our cocoon and see the world with new eyes, and perhaps start understanding some of its mysteries. This story is about that revelation, and all it took for the little girl is to step out into the wide, wide world and see it with her own eyes. Perhaps this story about her will be our epiphanic moment, as we will come to the understanding of the knowledge that we have regarding the world outside, regarding the world that we experience, right? We may understand, if not everything about it, at least some part of it. So let's now first talk about the conflict in this story. In literature, conflict signifies the struggle between two opposing forces. Conflict is that element which makes a story interesting. In this story, the conflict is internal in nature. It is the awakening of the soul which comes with the journey. The external journey is symbolic of the internal journey that Valli makes from knowledge to understanding, from innocence to experience, and across life and death. Now, let us jump right into the story, right? We have got enough introduction, and so let us talk about the summary. uh, it is always easy to divide the summary in bits and parts and then assess what we are experiencing as we move along with the story. So let's have the first part of the summary, that is the seed of an idea. So, what is the idea? You see, Baliamai, the full name of the girl, she was a young girl of 8, and she was called Valli lovingly. You can understand that calling somebody Valiamai, uh, her name is longer than her age if we put it on linear scale. That is, Valli, she was a very curious child. Why? How do we know that? Because she was fascinated by the bus that passed through her street each hour. Now, think about it. How many of us are curious to see a bus passing? Right, we have so many things to do. We have to play games, WhatsApp, check on our mobile. We are always afraid, this FOMO, the disease, fear of missing out, right? So we are not curious in that sense like Bali is. But this in fact shows her curiosity, because she wants to discover, she wants to analyze these people. All these moving faces greatly interested her. Perhaps she was searching for a story behind them unconsciously, maybe, but maybe she was doing that. Maybe she was assigning a story herself to these characters, right? A novel unfolding before her own eyes. Anyway, as she was fascinated by the bus that passed through her street each hour, she gradually became interested in a journey herself, the seed of a desire, right? This seed of a desire for a ride in the bus, it took its root in her heart. And she also learned that the fare was 30 paise one way and it took 45 minutes to reach the town. So she was, asking questions all around. And gradually she started her planning. Now, you see, it is natural for every human being to crave company. Bali, the 8-year-old girl, was unfortunate in the way that she had no friends on her street. It is, if you read the text, you'll find that indeed she had no friends on the street, and that is why she would stand at the gate and look at the bus. No one of her age to play with. However, she would spend a lot of time watching the street from her door. It gave her immense joy to look at the bus full of a new set of passengers every time it came in or departed for the city again. Now, what does it mean? You see, symbolically speaking, she was standing on the threshold. On one hand, there was the safety and security of a home, which, though kept her safe, cost her a connection with the world at large. Think about the well. You are inside the well. The well is protecting you, right? It is providing you a barrier, so that you are not harmed. No hurt may come to you, but at the same time, it is not letting you go out. Lakshman Rekha. As long as Sita is within the Lakshman Rekha, no demon can touch her, but she is not allowed to step out of it. And therefore, her life is limited within that Lakshman Rekha. And just see what happened when she stepped out of it. The moment she stepped out, experience happened, life happened, the whole Ramayan happened. So this boundary, this threshold, this home, it was keeping her safe, but at the same time, it was costing her connection with the world at large. While before her lay the whole wide world beckoning at her, calling her, and the bus was the medium. Every time, you see this enticing sight. The bus was going to the city, coming back, every time a new set of passengers. Basically, the bus was going into the unknown, right? From the known to the unknown. And every time there were changes, several changes, many changes. So, what would Valli do? She was happy to gaze endlessly at the passing crowd, but will she ever become a part of it? Let's see, but before that, let us talk about the word meanings. For example, we have the word pastime. Pastime means hobby or something that you enjoy doing while not working. Elaborate means carefully planned and organized, detailed. Unusual experiences, experiences which are out of the usual. Fascinating, it means extremely interesting and attractive. Overwhelming desire, a very strong desire for something. Kindle, not the device. Kindle means to make something like interest or emotion in somebody, to provoke somebody, to make somebody interested, right, in something. Slang expression. Slang expression is the informal expression to indicate strong emotions. Whenever Valli or her friends would know that some of them, any of them, had been to the city on the bus, they would become very jealous, and they would use this expression like children do. Oftentimes they do. They don't want something to be said, so they start singing, shouting loudly over to drown the voice with their own voice. So this was the slang expression. They would cry out proud, proud, without knowing the meaning exactly, but to them this was a slang expression, not a good word. And if we think about it, indeed, being proud is not at all good. So even without knowing, she was saying something, she was using some word as slang, which in fact can be used or should be used like that only. It should be considered to be a negative trait in a human being to be proud. And this is evident in the whole story. Valli does so many things without knowing actually what she's doing. She steps out of boundary, she goes on a ride, and she does everything, but most of it she does without knowing, without actually understanding what she's doing. Maybe someday she will realize, maybe someday she will tell all these stories to her children that when I was young, I did that. But right now, she doesn't understand. Next comes discreet, which means tactful, and scarcely, which means hardly or almost not. So, Valli plans. Now let's see what happens. What does she do? The journey begins. Valli gathers her courage and boards the afternoon bus on one spring day. A fine day to begin anything. And just remember, spring. Spring is a symbol which is used to indicate a new beginning. Always, every time. In literature, spring is a new beginning. So this, symbolically speaking, was Valli's new beginning, a new life. The moment you step out of your comfort zone, the moment you go out into the world, you do not remain the same. Changes do come, changes come. So this was a new Valli. The passengers and conductors enjoyed this diversion in the meantime in the form of this child. The bus was a new one with fresh paint and decor. So you just think about it. She is going out, and this is what we may call beginner's luck. She is going out for the first time, and for her journey, she finds a new bus, fresh paint, decor, and everything. And naturally, she enjoyed all that. She stood up on her seat to see the outside world, which she devoured to the fullest. This also indicates the little girl that she is. She's small. She's 8 years old, for God's sake, and she's small. So she stands up on the seat to see everything. And naturally, people how they are really, sometimes when you're small, when you're a child, and you're going alone, the people, they're really nosy, right? They constantly probe you, poke you with questions, with concern that you don't want, right? So Vali was angry when the other passengers considered her as a little girl and asked her to sit down, or they warned her that she would fall. But she was most irritated with an elderly woman who came to sit beside her and poked and probed her with several questions. Basically, she could not believe or could not digest the fact that a small girl like Valli could go out and about the world all by herself. She was not, what you can say, in a socially acceptable age to do all that on her own. And naturally, Valli was most irritated because obviously she wanted herself to be considered as a grown up and not a child. So, this particular journey that Valli started, this was her first step towards the world that was unknown. Her careful probing had provided her with all the necessary information, and thus, one day, with a show of great courage and a spirit of adventure, she boarded the bus. Typical of any child of her age. Valli too shows irritation at being treated as a child and wants to grow up fast. Her journey began on a wonderful note. As we have just seen, the bus she was on was a brand new one with fresh paint and luxurious seats. Valli stood up on the seat to enjoy the outside view, which she devoured to her heart's content. When the other passengers prohibited her from doing so for her own safety, she grudgingly obeyed. But she became real angry when an elderly lady sat beside her and poked and probed her with several questions. The conductor had a gentle sense of humor, and instead of getting irritated with Valli's attitude, he started calling her madam. So here comes the madam who rides the bus, right? Valli too gradually loosened up before him, which was evident in the occasional laughter that they shared. Thus, at the very onset of her journey, Valli had made a friend with the conductor. But the question is, how did she prepare for this? We can see that she is on the bus, but where did she get the money? Right? So let's move on. But again, let us make a short stop for the word meanings in this section. First of all, we have commandingly means with authority. Jolly sort is a friendly, funny guy. Slack time, it means no rush hour, relaxed crowd, no hurry, like that. Gleaming is to shine brightly. Luxurious is very comfortable, while devoured is to read or look at something with great interest and enthusiasm. Startled, on the other hand, means somewhat shocked due to a sudden surprise, and mimicking means to copy someone in a funny way. Finally, repulsive, it means disgusting, a feeling of strong dislike, a feeling that Valli reserved for the elderly woman, right? With all her poking and probing and also her looks, right? She didn't like her at all. So now let us move on to her first journey and how she managed that, how she prepared for that. Let's talk about that. You see, Valli had to steer clear from several temptations to save the fare for her journey. Now, you can understand that if we are to save money, where would we get it? We don't earn, right? As children, we don't earn anything. Basically, we get money, pocket money rather, when our parents give us something to, go and buy some ice cream or a packet of chips for yourself, or some uncle, distant uncle, aunt, they come and before leaving, they also put us some money in our hands, maybe 100 rupees or 50 rupees, 10 rupees even, but something they just give us, maybe to have, go and have one egg roll, right? Or do whatever you like. So like that, we often spent all the money that we receive, but Valli, in her case, she saved all the money. She had to steer clear from several temptations, and what she did, she had planned meticulously to get away and return unnoticed. The timing when her mother slept, she realized, was the best time to go out and about. As the ride took 45 minutes, she realized that going and coming it will take around 90 minutes, and she arranged her timings like that. As she was on the bus and was moving towards the city, the landscape delighted her, and she was delightfully amused with the young cow and its confusion and fear that reduced the bus to a crawl. Basically, the driver was honking, and the sound of the horn was making the young cow even more confused as he sprinted in this way and that way in front of the bus, and the driver had to slow down. Right, otherwise there would have been an accident. Um, he would have hit the cow. So Valli started laughing. This was immensely funny to her, and finally, like that, she reached the town. When she reached the town, the matured girl was lost again, and she was scared to stray away from the bus in case she got lost. She returned home in the same bus. So let us analyze this section. What do we understand? What do we see here happening? You see, basically, Valli had to show great restraint to put her plan into action. She saved money from wherever she could, even if that meant sacrificing her favorite candy or peppermint or even the merry-go-round. She saved little by little, and one day she had enough to embark on her quest for the unknown. Again, a small girl goes on to provide a great lesson that success comes to those who persevere, who try. So basically, the lesson is never stop trying. Valli never thought of giving up. The money never daunted her, and she kept moving forward until she found her seat in the bus and a great new view in front of her. Everyone on the bus was amused to find a little girl behaving like an adult. It provided a distraction from the mundane. However, the child would come out now and then, especially, when the young cow gave the driver a lot of trouble because of its own confused sprint. Valli was greatly amused by this life affirming sight, and note, this was a life affirming sight full of such joy, vivacity. And finally, she reached the city thoroughly enjoying herself. The child resurfaced herself in the city when she was quite afraid to leave the bus, and yet she was still responsible because even though the conductor offered her some snacks, some refreshment, she refused him. Maybe it can be a courtesy that she didn't want to trouble him, or it may be a wariness, like our parents tell us, never accept anything from strangers. So whatever it might be, wariness, cheerfulness, or simple courtesy, she was demonstrating the grown up within her. And she stayed abroad and started her homeward journey on the same bus. So, before moving on to the final section, let us quickly take a note of the word meanings in this part. There are so many words, but we will go through all of them bit by bit, slowly. First, we have painstaking. It means needing a lot of care, effort, and attention to detail. Thriftily means careful about spending anything or wasting it. Resolutely stifled, to prevent something with determination. Excursions. It means traveling for pleasure. Ventured out is to go cautiously or courageously. Hamlet, not the Shakespearean drama, but Hamlet in this case is a very small village. Gobbling up means to eat something up very fast, and it has a metaphorical meaning when you take in whatever you see, right? With great enthusiasm, right? You devour everything. That also means gobbling up visually, right? Metaphorical meaning. Obstacles means hindrances, something that make the situation difficult, while tremendous means very great, huge, massive. Thoroughfare means a public road for traffic, while merchandise means goods for sale. So now let us move on to the final section of this text. Basically, we now come to the understanding. Remember the theme: knowledge versus understanding. We know so many things. We read, we watch, we hear. So knowledge comes to us. That flow never stops. What we need to think about is, do we understand all that comes to us? Do we process all that knowledge? So let's see what happens in this section, and then we will analyze it. So on her return journey, Valli was equally eager to enjoy the landscape outside. Understanding dawned on her when she saw the same cow lying dead. So remember that life affirming movement, the joy, the vivacity? She saw the same cow lying dead. The contrast between life and death became clear before her at that moment. Life is beautiful. It is full of wonder, surprise, joy, energy, vivacity. But death is so ultimate. Death is like a full stop you are unable to erase no matter what you did. We will also have another story later on, the story of Kisa Gautami, Saman at Banaras, which will again deal with this concept of death, but we will get a completely different perspective. So stay tuned for that chapter. But right now, let's come back to Valli. The sight of the dead had dampened her spirit, and she became, she grew quiet. However, she returned home safe and sound. Nothing happened much, and when she returned home, she found her mother and aunt talking, gossiping, and unknowingly, unfortunately, she made a comment in their discussion. And because of that, her aunt thought her to be cheeky little girl talking like a grown up. But even though she heard it, she didn't feel bad. In fact, she smiled a little, but nobody understood the meaning of a smile and the experience that she had gained on the ride. Uh, Actually, you see, nobody actually understood, realized that she had gone out on a bus ride journey. Nobody knew that. So basically, how would they understand, right? So let us analyze what is happening here. The enthusiasm, you see, that breezed Valli through the first part of her journey was also sailing her towards home when she had yet another experience. However, while her previous experiences towards the city were full of joy and happiness, this one left her shaken to the core. She saw the same joyous cow lying dead on the ground. The fact that someone so full of life on one moment can be so helplessly lifeless the very next was something so horrible that it felt a bitter aftertaste in Wally's mouth. It was as if her own joy was sucked out, and the rest of her return journey she spent in silence. Back home, she discovered to her relief that none had found out her little escapade. She heard her mother and her aunt talking about the endless possibilities that lie in the outside world. Having faced with such experience recently, Valli couldn't but affirm to what her mother was saying. However, the participation of an apparently small child, remember Valli was 8, right? She was small, she was little. So her participation, even today, if we talk among the grown-ups, they are having a discussion, conversation, and if we go and talk there, comment on whatever they're saying, it is not appreciated, right? That is why they send us away. They say, okay, when two grown-ups talking, do not talk in the middle. So this kind of things, reprimands we get, and naturally, it was so for Valli also. Her aunt, she declared her to be a nose poking child. The author seems to point out that life can be experienced by anyone. You don't need to be a mother, aunt, father, or any of them. Like, right? You don't need to be a grown up to experience life. Basically, age is not a barrier, it is the willingness to embark on the journey that matters. Only the real experience can bring the understanding. The rest remains an empty chatter leading to a conviction less conversation. No belief. No, when you know something, that is fine. When you understand that something, you become it. It is a sense of becoming. Valli, she was becoming into a person which previously she had only the potential, but that journey brought or rather helped manifest that potential, right? So thus we have come to the end of this story, but before we end it, let us talk about the word meanings and the title. So first, the word meanings. Wonderful means very good, pleasant, or enjoyable. Horrible means very bad or unpleasant, basically kind of opposite. Spread eagled. Spread eagled indicates a position. It is a position with arms and legs spread out. People can sleep spread eagled, but basically we use this word with dead bodies, spread eagled. Haunted means something beautiful, sad, or frightening that cannot be forgotten. Enthusiasm, on the other hand, is a strong feeling of interest or excitement in something. Pokes her nose is to show interest in something completely unconcerned. So, this brings us to the end of the story. But again, as I said, let us talk about the title before we wrap it up. So let's now talk about the title. You see, the whole story is built up on the central idea of Valli going out on a bus ride, an event not so significant perhaps when seen generally, but exploring the particulars bring out astonishing impact of the journey. The very first thing that one may notice is the willingness towards the undertaking. Once Valli decides to go on the journey, she never turns back. She shows a maturity in saving up to meet her expenses on the journey by putting herself on a self restraint. The journey in itself is symbolic as it relates to the experience that one gets only from exposure to the outside world. This person uh, unwillingly provides an amusing relief as she constantly tries to behave like a grown up. Her annoyance was quite clear um, when some people they were trying to consider her as a small child. Perhaps it is only when we come out of our comfort zone, go out into the world, we grow up. The conductor calls Valli Madam jokingly, and since the entire story revolves around the bus journey undertaken by this Madame as title, it is perfect. So, thus we come to the end of the story, and I hope we have analyzed the story to the very core in a quite detailed manner. But even after that, we would be really happy to hear your thoughts. What do you think this journey symbolizes? What do you feel about Valli, the experience that she gains? What is your notion about life and death? What are your beliefs? We would like to know, we'd love to know all these things. And any question that you have, you may leave a question for us, and we will surely get back to you with whatever answer we can find. So that will be all for today, and hope we meet soon with another chapter. Thank you and goodbye.